What is cracking, my photography friends? Thank you for joining me here. Hope you're all doing really well. Yes, in this one, we're going to be doing some editing, going to be showing you how to create this kind of really popular look, these kind of faded matte look with kind of faded earthy colors, which for me is a style I really like playing around with. I'm going to show you how you can create this on your own images. We've got 3 images to edit today. A green one that's a little bit more blue, and one that's a little bit more orange. So we can work through these 3 earthy colors, how you create these colors and this kind of matte faded look as well. So let's not waste too much time. Let's jump straight into Lightroom and start editing. All right, so this first image here, as we can see, is a nice green one, and I'm using the edit I've already done as my reference. So if you've got a particular photo or a style you're trying to recreate, take a screenshot, bring it into Lightroom, use this as your reference, because this is really handy to have when you're editing your photos, to always go back to, have a look, see if your edit is on the right track. If I jump across to our histogram, you can see on that edit, it's a lot more squished together. So we're gonna have to kind of flatten our highlights, the whites here at the end, and also our blacks here have been flattened or faded a little bit. If we look at our greens, you can see they're really desaturated, but they're also got a little bit of blue or aqua in them. So we're gonna add that in as well. These are things we need to look at the photo and judge how we're gonna bring that into our edit. Let's start with the tone curve. I've actually copied this tone curve over so we can have a really good look at it. So you can see as soon as I turn the tone curve on there, we've created more of a matte look. Let's just bring our shadows up a fraction as well. And maybe our highlights. Whites are probably okay. So let's come back to the tone curve. Our kind of highlights here are really kind of squished. They're a lot more faded, a lot more matte compared to the original image. Our blacks are a little bit kind of faded as well. And you can see how I've created this. So the blacks on this end, if I bring that back down, you can see by bringing this up, the more you bring it up, the more it will fade out those blacks. So depending on how much you want to fade your image in the blacks, you can either bring it up quite high, like to about there. For me, maybe to about there. Still fades them out a little bit, but not too much. On the other end, you can see those highlights are really kind of squished and faded. And this is what creates that kind of flat, kind of faded or matte look. So I'm pretty happy with this tone curve. If I turn it off once more, you can see it's also added in or changed the color slightly. So that's where our colored curves come in. If you're unfamiliar with these colored curves, basically, as you can see, we've got different colors on either side of the curve. So we've still got the darkest part, our midtones and highlights along the curve, but this is how we can add in or remove color to each of those areas. So just as an example here, we've got cyan and red. If I pull down from this middle point, in our midtones, it's going to add in a little bit more cyan to the image, and that's actually improved it in my opinion. So this is what I do. I will go along these 3 points that I've added into each of the curves and just bring it up or down slightly, back and across, until I'm kind of happy with it. So overall, I'm pretty happy with this tone. The next thing we want to work on is our color. We know we have to reduce some of our colors, but what I'm actually going to do to start with is increase the overall vibrance. This just boosts the overall skin tones, a whole image of course, but this means we can go and reduce some of those individual colors, but we've already got kind of an overall color that I'm happy with. So I might just bring that up a little bit more, reduce our overall saturation as well. Now the next thing we're going to do is take a look at color grading. So this is how we can add in a little bit more kind of blue or aqua into those darker greens. Just so we can see what's happening, I like to reduce the color in the green first. So let's reduce our greens, the saturation, and also our yellow. This is already looking a little bit more like this one, but our greens just aren't quite there. So let's come down to color grading, which I've actually turned off. You can see in this one, it's almost kind of a slight aqua to those greens. Turn it on, and there's just that little bit of blue in the shadows. So what I've done there is hue is about 220 and our saturation is about 10. You can see as I bring that up, we're just getting a little bit of blue there into our shadows, which is what we want to create. So on our highlights, we've actually done the opposite. You can see I've just added in a very slight bit of kind of yellowy orange into the highlight. So it's very subtle, but these subtle kind of adjustments are how we create a really powerful kind of look. So the next thing I want to do is actually come down to calibration. I like to make some adjustments here before kind of tweaking HSL. So although there's no blue in this one, usually I like to reduce the hue to more of an aqua color. As you can see, this will start to affect our skin tones a little bit. So I'm going to bring that back by kind of just sliding our reds more towards an orange there as well. I'm just going to reduce some of these a little bit as well. Greens, I don't think I need to touch. I'm kind of happy with that where it is, but let's just reduce them all a little bit as well. The next thing we want to do, it's just annoying me that this one is a little bit more harsh. So I'm just going to soften it up by reducing clarity a fraction and reducing texture a fraction as well. You can even add in a little bit of haze, which give it that kind of more dreamy look as well. Next up, we're going to make our adjustments in HSL. So let's start with the skin tones here. I'll just zoom in a little bit. You can see the skin tones aren't far off from this image on the left. I did soften the face here quite a bit, which I'll show you in a sec. But one thing I want to do is just increase the luminance on mostly orange there, just to bring out our skin tones a little bit. So this is one thing I really like to do with skin tone, just to make them pop a little bit. I go to hue and just tweak them back and forth. Red, I like to keep an eye on the lips as I'm adjusting. Orange, maybe just a fraction there towards yellow. And maybe I'll just boost the skin tones a little bit there as well. Just to bring in a little bit more detail back, I'm just going to reduce the highlights there a fraction. The one thing I want to do, start playing with this green a little bit. So the yellows, we perhaps need to bring a little bit more back towards orange, I think, probably about there. And let's have a look at our greens. I think I'm pretty happy where they are. So that's pretty much where I want this image to be. There is a few final effects I did on this one just to make it a little bit more dreamy. So the first one was putting a radial gradient behind our subject. So what this has done is just create that slight bit of dreaminess behind our subject. And the other thing I did here was just soften the skin. So let's add in a brush, and I'm just gonna brush the face. Mostly negative texture on this one and just a little bit of negative clarity. Obviously you don't have to go this heavy if you don't like this look, but for this photo, I think it really suits this dreamy kind of feel. And to be honest, that image is pretty close to our one on the left. That's how we create that kind of faded matte, kind of desaturated green look. All right, so this image now is much more of a bluer image. You can see looking at it, we still have that kind of faded matte look. If we jump across and look at the histogram, you can see it's nice and compressed, which gives us that kind of flat, kind of faded look. So again, a lot of this is going to happen with our tone curve. So let's start with that. So let's just add in a few points to start with. And overall, we need to kind of crush those highlights a bit. I've crushed them quite a lot, and I'm going to do a similar thing to our blacks. Again, if you like that real faded look, you can bring that up a bit higher. But for me, I'm happy with that at about that level. I'm going to just tweak the rest of the curve a little bit. So our midtones, I'm just going to darken the midtones a little bit by bringing that point down, and our shadows, I'm just going to darken a fraction as well. We can add in an extra point here if you just want to fade out the very darkest part of those blacks and keep your shadows a bit darker. So let's just have a look at our colored curves. I'm going to add in 3 points on each of those and just make some slight adjustments. So let's start with the highlights. I think that one's pretty okay there. The midtones, just gonna add in a tiny bit of cyan to those midtones. and maybe a tiny bit to the shadows as well. So this is how I like to work with these colored curves. Very subtle adjustments and just slowly back and forth to see how it looks. So there I'm just adding a tiny bit of green into those midtones. Let's have a look at our highlights. Not too much happening there. And the shadows. Add in a little bit more cyan to those shadows. Okay, so happy with that. Let's look at our basic adjustments again. Maybe I'll bring our highlights down just a little bit, bring up our shadows a fraction just to bring back a little bit more detail, or we can bring up our exposure and our whites a little bit there, and just a little bit of black back into the image as well. So overall tone, pretty happy. Again, let's start tweaking that color a little bit more. So let's have a look at our color grading to start with. The shadows to this one, you can see blue to the shadows. So let's come over and select the blue we want, which kind of want aqua, but that's a bit too heavy. So I'm just gonna bring that to about that level. And again, the highlights, let's just have a look. Probably might even just add in a little bit of blue to this one as well, but very slightly. So maybe about there. All right, come down to our calibration. You can see the overall tones looking similar, but the color is still quite different. So we've still got some work to do on this one. Again, I'm just going to make some adjustments on calibration, bring those blues more towards aqua, and bring our reds slightly back towards orange. I'm just going to reduce those colors a little bit, come back up, and probably just boost our vibrance a little bit as well. All right, so now we can make those HSL adjustments, which are going to be kind of those final finishing touches that will really make this image kind of look much more like this one. So first of all, we know we need to reduce our blue and our aqua. So now it's looking much similar. I think this is still a little bit too teal for my liking, so let's just bring our aqua back towards blue and just play around with the blue. Actually, maybe just bring that back a tiny bit. So now we're looking quite similar, but I just want to boost this jacket and make that really kind of pop and stand out. So firstly, the hue, I want to make it a little bit more orange. So red towards orange, about there. Jump across to luminance. I'm going to boost that and boost the orange luminance as well. Maybe even on the bag, which is probably more yellow. And let's really bring up the saturation on the jacket as well. Even reduce those blues a little bit more if we really wanted that kind of desaturated gray blue kind of look. Another edit there, creating that kind of matte look. All right, so lastly, finishing on an orange one. Again, I've got our edit on the left here. You can see on this one, again, in those shadows, we're really trying to change the color. Overall, it's nice and warm, but there is still some kind of blue in the shadows that we can kind of see. So let's create this one really quickly. First of all, we need to warm it up. So I'm just gonna bring our white balance all the way over, which we can go and tweak later on, but we want it nice and warm to begin with. I'm also going to just bring up the exposure, and then let's come down again and see how we created this kind of matte look using the tone curve. So again, I've turned the tone curve off. If I turn it back on, you can see how I've created this kind of look. So our overall curve, again, we've really flattened those kind of highlights, our whites slightly, and we've just lifted our blacks a fraction there as well. So with our colors, again, I think this is quite similar to the first one. I kind of copied those, and you can see how it's kind of created this overall kind of little bit of color in the shadows. And again, if we wanted to tweak those, we could just go and make those kind of slight adjustments to where we kind of feel they're necessary. So let's just come back up to our basic adjustments and just play around with this a little bit. I'm just going to make a few tweaks here. And let's come down and start working with color on color grading. Again, I've just switched this one off, but it's obvious that on this one, we wanted to add in that kind of blue to the shadow. So if I switch that back on, you can see in our shadows, we've added in that little bit of blue you can see there. Might even increase that one a little bit compared to the original. And again, I haven't done anything to our midtones, but in our highlights, I've added a little bit of purpley blue, but not too much. Again, once we go in and reduce some of those other colors in the image, this is where these color grading changes will really be more obvious. So let's come down to calibration on this one. Create kind of a similar feel to those other images. So we're going to tweak our blue hue down and tweak our red hue to the right. I'm just going to reduce these again, and green we can play with, but I'm probably going to keep where it is. Next up, obviously HSL. We're basically going to take some of the color out of this image. So let's use our selector tool on this occasion, and then just click and drag down to reduce some of the color there in the background. Now, overall, this is pretty much all we need to do on this one. There's not much other colors in the image, but if there was, we could go in and just reduce kind of everything else. And then obviously we're mostly left with the orange there. I might just increase our saturation slightly. And we're already really close to this image on the left. Nice kind of matte look, nice colors. One thing I want to do is go in and add in another radial gradient, similar to what we did in the other image. And again, we've got before, after. You can see how our shadows are nicely blending in to the rest of the image, creating that kind of matte look. And I'm pretty happy with that. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you did enjoy this one. If you did, please do subscribe, both for me and for you. I'm going to be dropping a few more videos like this one very soon. For now, keep on creating and keep on growing, my friends. I will catch you in the next one. Bye for now.